I was sitting at Craig's big glass dining table in Charlotte, surrounded by Lauren's family as we dug into our usual Sunday lunch. The smell of roast chicken and mashed potatoes filled the air. But it was the coffee that hit me first. Craig handed me a mug, smiling a little too wide, a little too perfect. "Specially brewed just for you," he said, but his eyes were a little too calm, like he was hiding something. The moment the mug came close enough, I noticed it. Not the rich, warm scent of coffee. No, this was sharper, metallic even, almost chemical. It wasn't burnt or bitter. It was just wrong. I set the mug down without touching it. "I'll let it cool," I said, trying to sound casual. My stomach twisted, and I could feel the familiar tension in my chest. Something wasn't right. I'd been through this before, and I wasn't about to let it happen again. Lauren and Craig carried on talking like everything was fine, but I knew better. In 3 years of marriage, I'd been sick at least 5 times after eating or drinking things from them. Food poisoning, they called it. "Just bad luck," Lauren always said. But I was starting to wonder. I faked a text on my phone, stood up like I needed to take a work call, and on my way out, I swapped my mug with Craig's. He didn't even notice. He just kept laughing at something Lauren said. They were so absorbed in their own little world. They didn't see the trap I was setting. I stood there in the hallway, my heart hammering as I watched Craig bring the mug to his lips, his fingers stiff. At first, he took a sip, like it was nothing. Casual, but then, within minutes, something changed. His blinking started to get erratic, too fast, like his eyes couldn't focus. He rubbed his forehead, squinting hard, and I could see the way his whole body tensed, like he was fighting something inside. His hand shook when he set the mug down. "Lauren," he said, his voice low, cracking. "Something's off." I saw the panic in his face, the sweat starting to bead on his forehead, and my pulse shot up, the room closing in around me. He stood up too quickly, his legs wobbling, like he couldn't control them. He staggered backward, one hand reaching for the chair behind him, missing it at first, then collapsing into it with a thud. I moved, but slowly, calmly, like I wasn't about to lose it myself. There was no time to freeze now. I had to see this through. I walked back into the dining room, my feet dragging a little on the hardwood. Lauren looked up at me, confused at first, but then her gaze flicked to Craig. That's when she saw it. Craig was pale, too pale, his face sweating and flushed all at once, his lips trembling. "What did you put in it?" Lauren hissed, her voice low, like she was trying not to lose control. She knelt down beside him, hands hovering, trying to comfort him. But I could see the way her breath hitched. She knew. "That wasn't his cup," I said, keeping my voice steady, even though everything in me screamed to run or scream or do something. My phone was already in my hand, and I was pointing it at Craig, recording the whole thing. Lauren shot up and turned toward me, wide-eyed. "What the hell are you talking about?" I switched them. I wasn't about to break eye contact with her. I had to stay in control, even if everything inside me was ready to unravel. I let out a shaky breath. My fingers hovered over my phone, but I couldn't waste time. I dialed 911 with my thumb, my voice forced to stay calm. "This is an emergency," I said quickly, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "He's reacting to something in the coffee. It was meant for me." My stomach twisted with the realization that the game was over. I kept the phone on speaker, just in case. The operator's voice came through like static at first. "Sir, I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me what's happening?" He's seizing up. His hands won't stop shaking. He's sweating. I could hear the panic creeping in, but I tried to choke it down. "I think he's been poisoned." Lauren turned to me, her face now twisted with rage, but she was too frantic to really look threatening. She was still kneeling beside Craig, shaking his shoulder, trying to keep him conscious. "What did you do?" she spat. I swallowed, the heat of her words hitting me like a slap, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of losing it. "You put something in his coffee. You've been doing it to me for months, trying to make me sick." The words came out cold, and I didn't care. This was it. This was the moment. The dispatcher was still on the line, asking questions, but I wasn't listening. All I could focus on was the sickening way Craig's breathing was slowing, how he was slipping in and out of awareness, how his skin looked like it was melting right off of him. I kept my phone steady, kept the recording going, even though I could feel the weight of it, of everything bearing down on me. Lauren was still trying to put on a mask, trying to look like she had no idea what was happening, but I saw the crack in her, saw the way her hands trembled as she leaned over Craig. She was just as scared as I was, and that, for some reason, hit me harder than anything. "Is he going to die?" Lauren whispered, barely able to speak. I looked at her, my stomach sinking deeper, the anger now turning to something else, something darker. "I don't know," I said quietly, my voice almost breaking. "But if he does, this is on you." I kept my eyes on her as the dispatcher spoke again, asking for more details, trying to get me to describe Craig's condition more clearly. I wanted to scream, to lose it completely, but I couldn't. Not now. I had to stay sharp, had to stay focused. I could hear the ambulance sirens in the distance now, cutting through the quiet. I glanced at Lauren one more time, and the look she gave me wasn't fear, it wasn't guilt. It was cold, empty. The sirens got louder, and I knew that help was almost here, but all I could think about was how this was only the beginning. At the hospital, I followed the paramedics as they wheeled Craig into the emergency bay, his body limp, his chest barely rising with each shallow breath. Lauren was trailing behind, but she stopped when she reached the entrance, mumbling something about needing to park the car. I didn't even look back. I knew what that meant. I kept walking, pushing through the automatic doors, trying to keep my head together, trying to breathe through the growing weight in my chest. A nurse caught up to me, her face serious, her voice quiet but urgent. "Your brother-in-law's in critical condition." I nodded, but my gut was already tying itself in knots. "I think I know what's going on," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I pulled out my phone and handed it to her, the recording from earlier still playing, the sound of Craig's voice, the moment everything shifted, the panic, the confusion, Lauren's voice. It was all there, every sickening second of it. The nurse took the phone without a word, studying it for a moment before glancing back up at me. "I'll get this to the doctors," she said, her face hardening with a mixture of concern and disbelief. "We'll be in touch." She turned and walked off, leaving me standing in the hallway alone. The sounds of the hospital, machines beeping, voices echoing, the rush of people moving in and out, felt like they were coming from a distance. It was hard to focus, hard to hear anything, except the way my pulse was pounding in my ears. Lauren showed up a few minutes later, slipping past the sliding doors like nothing had happened. She walked up to me, her eyes a little too wide, a little too bright. "What's going on? What's taking so long?" she asked, her voice too soft, too controlled. I didn't answer her. I couldn't. I didn't want to hear her pretend that she didn't know. Instead, I said, "They found synthetic compounds in Craig's blood. The same kind I've been sick from." She froze for a split second, her eyes darting to the side before she looked back at me, completely unfazed. She shrugged like this was nothing. "You were supposed to be out for a few days." "Not dead," she said, her voice low, almost apologetic. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth, but no words came. I felt the weight of everything crashing down, all at once. This wasn't about food poisoning or bad luck anymore. This was real. This was deliberate. "Why?" I asked, the question catching in my throat. "Why would you do this to me?" She didn't flinch, didn't try to pretend she was sorry. She just looked at me, like I was the one who didn't understand. "The board seat," she said, her voice flat now, resigned. "That spot at Henderson Marketing. I've been fighting for it for 2 years. You got the offer without even trying." The words sliced through me, each one sharper than the last. I couldn't breathe for a second. Everything, the years, the relationship, the trust I'd built with her, collapsed under the weight of her confession. The board seat, the job, the power. "That's what this was about?" I asked, my voice barely holding steady. "You tried to kill me? Over a job?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. This wasn't about love. This wasn't even about family. It was about something bigger than all of that. The silence between us was thick. My thoughts scrambled to make sense of everything she'd just admitted. All the lies, all the sickness. It had all been planned, calculated. I wasn't just a husband or a partner to her. I was an obstacle. I wanted to shout, to tell her how sick I felt, how betrayed I was. But there was no point. The reality was worse than I could have imagined. She had played me, used me, and for what? A seat at the table? A place she thought was hers? I turned and walked down the hallway, not caring if she followed. There was nothing left to say. The night dragged on, cold and tense, like I couldn't breathe right. Detective Slater took my statement in a small room at the hospital, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing like they were trying to make this worse. I handed him my phone and showed him the texts Lauren had sent Craig. April 12th, I read from the screen. Expect him to be down for 2 days after this one. I scrolled. Same for May 8th, June 5th. All the same notes after each sick episode. Slater stopped writing for a moment, his gaze fixed on the phone screen. She was planning your downfall. For how long? Since at least April, I said again, my jaw tight. I could feel the anger creeping in, but it wasn't just anger. It was disbelief too. How had it gone on so long? How had I not noticed sooner? I could feel the tension growing in the room as Slater absorbed everything. His eyes flicked back to my phone, to the records I'd kept. And then he stood up, his voice calm but stern. We'll need to follow up with Craig. We're starting to piece together what happened. I nodded, barely registering his words. My head was spinning. Craig was still in the ICU, but they'd said he was starting to talk. It felt like everything was about to break wide open. And it did. Later that night, I got the call from Slater. He put Craig on the line for a minute, his voice weak and hoarse. She said it was just mild, Craig told Slater, his words slow, like they took everything out of him to speak. Something to cause fatigue, nausea, nothing permanent, but I didn't think it was going to go this far. I leaned against the wall of the hospital corridor, my mind racing. Nothing permanent. That's how they'd planned it. A little sickness here and there, a few days off work, but nothing that would raise any real alarms. Just enough to keep me out of the picture long enough for Lauren to swoop in and claim the Henderson contract. It was sickening to hear him confirm it, but it didn't make me feel better. It just made it all more real. Slater's voice broke through the haze of my thoughts. She was in on it, wasn't she? He asked. You can't say it was just Craig's idea. I rubbed my face, swallowing hard. She was the mastermind. Craig was just a pawn. Slater was quiet for a beat, processing the information. Then he spoke again, more direct this time. And now, with the tox screens showing up those chemicals, it's looking like they were trying to poison you. For a job, I didn't say anything, just nodded numbly. It sounded like a bad movie plot, but here I was, living it. When I finally hung up with Slater, I was left standing there, the weight of everything pressing down on me. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the fact that this wasn't an impulsive thing. They'd been planning this for months, like it was just another business move, another strategy. To them, I was a casualty, an obstacle in their way to power. The plan was starting to unravel in a way they hadn't expected. Lauren tried to claim that Craig acted alone, but the digital trail, the texts, the calendar notes, told a different story. She had been orchestrating this. She had been lying from the beginning. And now, it was only a matter of time before the whole thing came crashing down. 2 days later, the police served a warrant at our house. I stood in the living room, my hands stuffed in my pockets, trying to look calm as 2 officers worked their way through the place. My mind was spinning, even though I knew this was coming. I knew they'd find the evidence, but seeing them go through the house, opening drawers, moving things around like it was just another case, felt like I was losing something I couldn't get back. The officers went upstairs, and I followed them to the office, the room where Lauren did most of her work. I hadn't stepped in here since everything blew up. She kept it neat, too neat, everything in place, like she wanted to make sure no one noticed anything out of the ordinary. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Nothing was out of the ordinary until you started digging. One of the officers walked straight to the desk and paused in front of the locked drawer. The way he handled the key, like he'd done it 100 times before, made my stomach turn. It was the drawer where Lauren kept her important things, her files, her notes, the things she didn't want me to see. The lock clicked open, and the officer pulled out 2 small sealed bottles. My breath caught in my throat. The labels were smudged, but there was no hiding the fact that these were lab-grade chemicals, the kind of stuff you couldn't just buy at a store, the kind of stuff that could ruin a person's life. I stepped forward before anyone could ask, before they could make a mistake. Those are the chemicals, I said, my voice hoarse. The same stuff that showed up in Craig's blood. And mine? The officer glanced at me, then at the bottles, and nodded. He bagged them without saying anything. I felt like I should say something else, but the words didn't come. I couldn't look at those bottles anymore. They were proof of everything. Another officer had been going through Lauren's phone, pulling up the texts she'd sent Craig. They didn't say much, but they didn't need to. The messages said everything. One of these says, "If he makes the Henderson pitch, we lose the deal. We have to keep him home," the officer read aloud, his voice like it belonged to someone reading a grocery list. "And here, try what you used last time. Double it." He barely noticed it in the tea. He stopped and looked up at me. "You saw this?" I nodded, feeling my chest tighten. This was it. This was everything. "Yeah, I've been keeping track. I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't have proof until now Slater had told me to gather everything." I handed the officer the rest, the backup audio from Lauren's accidental voice note. I had it saved on my phone, just in case she slipped up again. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "Here," I said, pressing play. "Listen to this." The officer held the phone to his ear. Her voice crackled through the speaker. "I need him too tired to show up. Not dead, Craig. Be careful with the dose." The officer didn't react immediately, but the shift in his posture told me everything I needed to know. He straightened up, turned the phone off, and slid it back into the bag. Slater had warned me this would take time, that the DA would move slowly. But after hearing the tapes and seeing the evidence, it felt like things were moving faster than I could process. Craig was getting better, slowly, but now he was ready to talk. He could finally say what had been too hard for him to say before. A few hours later, I spoke with him on the phone. He was still groggy, his voice barely above a whisper. "She promised me a cut if we kept you down long enough. But I didn't think it was going to go this far." I closed my eyes, letting the weight of his words sink in. It wasn't just about business for her. It wasn't just about getting the deal. It was about everything: power, money, control. And I was just the pawn in their game. The DA's office moved quickly after that. The charges came fast. Attempted poisoning, conspiracy, corporate sabotage. It was all over the news by the next day. My name, my face, plastered across every outlet. But I didn't care about that anymore. What mattered was that it was done. The truth had come out. And no matter how much Lauren tried to deny it, there was no hiding what they had done. I didn't feel satisfaction, not yet. There was too much damage, too much lost. But I felt something else, something I couldn't put into words, at least not yet. Something like relief, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Lauren and Craig's world was falling apart, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. It was over. The courtroom was packed, but it felt like the air had thickened into something heavy and suffocating. I sat in the back, hands folded tight in my lap, trying not to let the tension crawl up my neck. Lauren sat at the defendant's table, sandwiched between her attorneys, her face pale, like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her hair was pinned back in a tight bun, but I could see how brittle she looked, like everything was falling apart just under the surface. She barely glanced at me, and when she did, her eyes were cold. There was no shame, no regret, just a kind of icy detachment, like she was still holding on to some hope that she could twist her way out of this. But that wasn't going to happen. The trial was moving quickly now. Craig pled guilty, which didn't surprise me. He didn't have much choice. His testimony confirmed everything: the texts, the chemicals, the plan to keep me down long enough for Lauren to steal the Henderson contract. It was all out in the open. The prosecutor laid it out step by step. 3 prior poisoning attempts linked to food Lauren or Craig had given me. One time it was in my coffee. Another time it was in a tea she'd made for me. Each time it had left me sick, bedridden, but not enough to send me to the hospital. At least, not until Craig's last dose. Doctor Corbin from the ER took the stand next, confirming the elevated compounds in my blood from those past visits. The same compounds that showed up in Craig's toxicology reports. Everything matched. There was no getting around it. The jury didn't take long to deliberate, and when they came back, the verdict was clear. "Guilty on all counts," the judge said, his voice firm. "Lauren Thomas, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in state prison." Lauren didn't even flinch. She just sat there, her back stiff, eyes locked straight ahead. She didn't look at me once as the judge moved on to Craig's sentencing. "Craig Thomas, you are hereby sentenced to 8 years, reduced for your cooperation with authorities." I didn't watch as they led them away, but I heard the shuffle of feet, the clink of handcuffs. It was over. For them, anyway. I didn't expect anything, but as Lauren was being escorted out of the courtroom, she turned her head just enough to meet my eyes. There was no remorse, no apology. Her face was set, a stone mask with only one expression: rage. She looked at me like I'd personally torn her world apart. And maybe, in some twisted way, I had. But she had made her choices. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I just stared back. And in that moment, I understood. All of it. The power games, the manipulation, the way she had twisted our lives for a shot at something she thought she deserved more than me. It wasn't about love. It never had been. As the doors slammed shut behind her, I felt a finality settle over me. This was over. The nightmare had ended. But the truth was, the hardest part wasn't even the betrayal. It wasn't the poison, the lies, or the years I'd spent in the dark. It was standing there, in the courtroom, watching her leave with nothing but that look on her face. Like I was the one who had ruined everything. And maybe that was the worst part of it all, knowing she'd never be able to see me for what I truly was. The one who survived, the one who got away. A year later, I stood in the conference room at Sterling and Field, running through my notes one last time before presenting the quarterly report. The Henderson account, the one they tried to steal from me, had grown by 40% under my lead. It wasn't just a number on a page. It was proof that I had risen above everything they'd thrown at me. My new team was solid. No drama, no backstabbing, no poison in the break room. Just honest work. I glanced at the team, all of them watching me, waiting for the signal to dive into the numbers. It felt different now, lighter. A year ago, I wouldn't have believed this version of myself was even possible. But here I was, standing tall, more focused than ever. The past didn't define me anymore. I did. The local news ran a segment last month. Marketing exec survives poison. Plot by wife and brother-in-law. It was the kind of headline that made you cringe, the kind you didn't need to hear twice. I didn't watch it. I didn't need to. I already knew the narrative. I'd lived it. What mattered was this. They lost everything trying to take me out. And I didn't just survive, I thrived. Lauren's firm had disavowed her, distancing themselves like they didn't know her at all. Craig's career collapsed too. Their names? Scorched in the industry. No one wanted anything to do with them. I never got revenge in the dramatic sense. No late-night confrontations, no public speeches, nothing like that. But every signed client, every earned bonus, every new deal, it was all the revenge I needed, the kind of success that left a mark without lifting a finger. I wrapped up my presentation, the partners nodding along, clearly impressed. As I finished, one of them stood and shook my hand. "Great work as always," he said, his grip firm. "You're a hell of an asset to this company." The team clapped, and I could feel the weight of their respect in the room. Then, just as I was about to leave, one of the junior execs came over with a bottle of bourbon, a wide grin on his face. "For you, man. Team's got your back." I took the bottle, the glass cool in my hand, and smiled. "Thanks," I said, my voice steady. But something inside me shifted. It wasn't just about the bonus or the accolades. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about this. The work, the growth. The fact that I had finally made it through. I walked out of the room with the bottle in my hand, feeling the weight of the last year melt away, replaced by something else. My thoughts weren't on the past, or on Lauren and Craig, or on the disaster they had caused. My only thought as I stepped into the elevator was this: I'm just getting started.